Have you ever felt dismissed, underestimated, or judged by others before they truly knew your story? Imagine a moment where quiet strength meets loud assumptions, and the truth of someone's incredible past is revealed not through words, but through an awe-inspiring act. This is a tale that reminds us how true legends often walk among us, unnoticed, until their undeniable skill speaks volumes, leaving everyone in stunned silence. Join us as we discover the power of silent precision and the profound impact of recognizing the extraordinary in the ordinary. Be more comfortable over at the pistol lanes, one of the SEAL trainees called out with a smirk, his tone dripping with condescension. Another one chuckled behind him, loud enough for Haley to hear. Or maybe just watch. That rifle might kick harder than you can handle. Their mocking laughter rippled through the air, a casual cruelty born of ignorance, their words blending into the faint pops and cracks of gunfire echoing down the range. Haley didn't look at them. She didn't react at all, not even a flicker of annoyance crossing her face. Her eyes remained calm, focused only on her rifle as she finished the final checks. Bolt assembly, optics alignment, bipod extension. Her hands moved with quiet purpose, every motion efficient, unhurried, and so fluid it looked almost rehearsed. Only when the last adjustment was made did she stand fully upright and roll up her sleeve. That was when everything changed. The SEAL commander, who until that moment had been observing from further back, caught sight of the tattoo inked into the skin of her forearm. His breath caught mid-inhale, the faintest trace of recognition, and then respect, flashing in his eyes. He froze in place, his sharp gaze locked on her, reading the story told in a single, simple mark. The chatter and laughter of the trainees faltered as they noticed his reaction, but he didn't even glance at them. Because he knew, and she knew he knew. That symbol was no ordinary tattoo. It wasn't just ink. It was a legacy written in blood, sweat, and unspoken sacrifice. It spoke of black operations nobody ever admitted existed, missions buried so deep they were little more than whispers even in the most classified halls. The kind of service that left no medals, only scars. Haley Brooks, 30 years old, once known by the codename Starfall. One of the very few to carry the Ghost Talon insignia on her skin, a mark reserved for operators who had gone into the darkest corners of the world and come back alive, often barely. She had served in units most people never even knew existed, and when she'd been discharged after injuries sustained on a classified op, she had simply disappeared. To the rest of the world, she was just another quiet civilian now. A woman you'd pass on the street without a second glance. Nobody knew what she'd done or what she'd endured to come home at all, and she liked it that way. Today, she'd come to the civilian range just to keep her edge sharp. No ceremony, no announcement, just another day maintaining a discipline most of these young men wouldn't understand until much later in their careers, if they were lucky enough to ever see what she'd seen. The range itself buzzed with its usual mix of activity, amateurs in baseball caps and ear protection, swapping tips on ammo and stances, small knots of hobbyists comparing scopes and triggers, all wrapped in the relaxed, social air of a Saturday at the range. It wasn't like the controlled chaos of a military training ground. Here, people came to have fun, to unwind. Nobody really expected to see a professional at work here. Haley didn't mind the noise or the assumptions. She'd gotten used to being underestimated a long time ago. She found an open lane at the far end, slung her old canvas bag onto the bench, and began laying out her kit. The bag was battered, faded, its fabric worn soft from years of hard use, but everything inside was pristine. Rifle parts gleamed with careful maintenance, each piece fitted into its place like a puzzle she'd solved 1,000 times before. Her movements were measured, practiced, utterly silent despite the clatter of activity all around her. Even the way she extended the bipod and checked the torque on her scope betrayed the habits of someone for whom noise and wasted seconds could mean the difference between life and death. Yet no one else noticed, except him. The commander's eyes stayed fixed on her as she settled into position, adjusting her cheek weld, steadying her breath, her entire body relaxing into a posture that was at once casual and lethal. Around her, the SEAL trainees were still watching her with half smirks and raised eyebrows, nudging each other, oblivious to what she really was. But he knew, and that alone was enough to silence the room for just a heartbeat anyway. Challenging for her, 5 perfectly clustered holes appeared, dead center without a single stray. The paper swayed slightly as if in quiet disbelief. For a moment, silence settled over the line of shooters. The smug laughter died mid-breath, replaced by a stunned stillness. The young trainee who'd stood over her shoulder now stood frozen, his smirk fading into something that almost resembled respect, but not quite yet. He blinked at the target, then at her, as though his mind couldn't quite connect the calm, unassuming woman before him with the ruthless efficiency she had just demonstrated. Haley lowered her rifle with the same deliberate, composed motion she had raised it, and began to reload without so much as a glance at him. She didn't smile, didn't gloat, didn't even acknowledge the collective shift in the air around her. Inside, she felt nothing but the steady quiet of a professional who had done this 1,000 times before, in places and circumstances that would have left these boys rattled and broken. The tattoo on her forearm caught the fluorescent light as her sleeve shifted, but none of them looked closely enough or knew enough to recognize it. Not yet. One of the civilian shooters, a middle-aged man in a baseball cap who'd been quietly minding his own lane until now, whistled low under his breath. The sound was soft, almost reverent. "Well, damn," he murmured. But he kept his eyes forward, knowing better than to intrude. The young SEAL trainee, however, finally seemed to realize he'd lost whatever little high ground he thought he had. His cheeks flushed, though whether from embarrassment or irritation was hard to tell. "Lucky group," he muttered, trying and failing to keep his voice steady, as if saying it out loud could make it true. Haley didn't bother to look at him. She simply chambered another round with that same precise, quiet confidence, the kind that spoke louder than words ever could. In her mind, she replayed his earlier words, "Don't want you to miss and have bullets flying everywhere," and almost, but not quite, allowed herself a faint smile. She adjusted her stance and lined up for the next string of fire, calm as ever, while behind her the group of SEAL trainees grew quiet, their earlier jokes and laughter replaced with uneasy glances between one another. A few stole looks at her as if trying to piece her together now, seeing her not as the civilian woman they dismissed on sight, but as something else. Ryan Cole had told her once, years ago, that the best way to silence doubters was never through words, but through skill. Ghost talons don't explain, we execute. That's why they fear us. She had lived by that ever since. And so she shot again, a rhythm of sharp cracks filling the range, each shot hitting its mark as though the target itself had called her bullets home. The task had been challenging, yet not beyond her. 5 precise bullet holes now marked the paper target in front of her, forming a flawless 5-pointed star right at the center of the bullseye, a pattern so deliberate, so impossibly perfect, it almost didn't seem real. It was more than a display of skill. It was a signature, unmistakable to those who knew. Starfall. That name lived in whispers within classified circles, attached to stories of an operative whose precision under fire bordered on supernatural. This wasn't just accuracy, dumb. It was a kind of artistry, born from muscle memory honed over years of real combat, under conditions that would have broken most soldiers. The chatter and crack of gunfire from the other lanes halted, one by one, until the entire facility had fallen silent. Muffled conversations turned into stunned hushes as every eye drifted toward her lane, toward that target, then back to her. Disbelief rippled through the room, visible in wide eyes and slack jaws. The young trainee who had only moments earlier smirked at her and offered condescending shooting tips now stood rigid and wordless, his face a study in confusion and dawning comprehension. His gaze stayed fixed on the target, and he looked as though the very ground he stood on had shifted beneath him. All that arrogant confidence drained away, replaced by something almost like reverence or fear. Other shooters from around the range began drifting closer, drawn by the magnetism of what they'd just witnessed. Murmured voices rose around her. How is that even possible?" someone whispered under their breath. "I've never seen anything like it," another added, voice low and heavy with awe. A small crowd began to form now, clustering around her lane, leaning in to see the impossible with their own eyes. And then, at that exact moment, Commander Ryan Cole walked into the facility. Cole was a legend in his own right. Among SEALs, his name carried a weight matched only by the quiet authority of the man himself. He was known throughout the special operations community for his tactical brilliance, his command presence, and the kind of steady, unshakable leadership that forged warriors out of boys. This was supposed to be just another routine inspection of training activities, a brief walkthrough to ensure everything was running to standard. But almost immediately he noticed that something was off. There was a strange energy in the air, and all attention seemed to converge on one particular lane. A cluster of personnel, trainees, and civilians alike had gathered there, murmuring in low, incredulous tones. Cole's eyes narrowed. His instinct told him something unusual, something worth knowing was happening here. He changed course and began making his way toward the commotion. As he approached, he caught sight of her, a woman standing alone, calm and composed despite the throng around her. She didn't acknowledge the whispers or the eyes on her. She was simply rolling up her sleeve, adjusting her stance after the heat of her rapid firing sequence. The motion was efficient, thoughtless, muscle memory, like everything else about her. That was when Cole saw it. On her exposed left forearm, coiled in stark black ink, was a tattoo, an eagle entwined with a serpent. His breath hitched. It wasn't just a tattoo. It was the tattoo, the covert insignia of one of the most secretive, highly classified joint operations units in existence. Fewer than a dozen people in the entire military even knew it existed. For the first time in years, Ryan Cole faltered. His easy, confident stride slowed. He stopped cold, staring, recognition crashing over him like a breaking wave. He knew that tattoo, and he knew the shooting signature. That perfect five-pointed star was more than a demonstration of skill. It was the unmistakable calling card of a figure who had been spoken of in half-believed stories among commanders like himself. A ghost, a legend, Starfall. He had heard the name, only a code name, never a real one, from other commanders who'd once had the rare privilege or misfortune of working with Ghost Talon operatives. Starfall was a name that carried a certain awe, a certain chill, because nobody outside those circles even believed she existed. And yet here she was, at a civilian shooting range, surrounded by green trainees who hadn't the faintest idea who they were dealing with. Cole felt a strange weight settle on him as the implications crystallized. The entire room seemed to hold its breath as he stepped closer. He didn't bark an order. He didn't even raise his voice. But his demeanor had changed completely. The casual command presence he usually carried was gone, replaced by something quieter, sharper, a respect that came from one warrior recognizing another. He stopped just short of her lane. His eyes found hers. "Where did you serve?" he asked, his voice even but low, the kind of question that was also an answer. Her reply was almost an afterthought, spoken just loud enough for everyone around them to hear. "Ghost Talon," she said, and the words struck the room like a thunderclap. The young SEAL trainees who'd snickered at her earlier now looked stricken, the blood draining from their faces. The name Ghost Talon was one they'd only ever heard in whispered, uncertain tones, a name spoken as if it were more myth than reality, a shadow unit whose operatives moved unseen and unrecorded. But the evidence was undeniable. She hadn't argued with them. She hadn't defended herself when they laughed at her, mocked her, belittled her presence here. Instead, she'd answered them with 5 perfect bullets and a silence so profound it seemed to echo through the range. They understood now, and nothing would ever be the same. The air inside the shooting range was thick, and yet somehow it felt even heavier now. Heavy with the kind of silence that only true skill could command. Heavier than all the laughter, louder than all the mocking words that had come before. It was the kind of silence that settled into your bones when you realized you'd been wrong about someone. And the weight of that knowledge left everyone still, watching, humbled. Commander Ryan Cole walked through the stunned crowd with a measured, deliberate stride. Every step seemed to carry the full gravity of a man whose understanding of his world, of his own legendary career, had just been shaken to its core. His sharp eyes scanned the shooters standing frozen at the line, those young SEAL trainees who'd only minutes ago been full of brash confidence, so eager to show off and share their supposed expertise. Now they stood rooted in place, all swagger stripped away, their mouths silent as their minds raced to process what they'd just seen. Even the civilians, regular men and women who'd come here simply to practice, stared slack-jawed at the target display. Some leaned forward, as though getting closer might help them make sense of the impossible pattern punched clean through the paper, each hole a testament to control and precision so far beyond their imagination it didn't seem real. The faint smell of gunpowder hung in the air, sharp and acrid, but no one seemed to breathe. Cole finally stopped just a few feet from her. Haley Brooks. Starfall. She stood casually by the shooting bench, her weapon already cleared and resting neatly where she'd left it. She didn't flinch under his stare, nor did she move to speak first. Instead, she met his eyes with that calm, understated smile. The kind of smile only someone like her could wear, someone who carried her own legend quietly, unwilling or unable to ever name the full weight of what she'd done. Cole's voice when it came was soft. No trace of the easy command he used with his men, no barked orders, no casual authority. Just quiet respect, thick with a dawning recognition of who stood before him. "Ma'am," he said, his tone bordering on reverent, "I never thought I'd have the privilege of meeting someone from Ghost Talent Operations." Her smile widened by just a fraction. Haley knew that look in his eyes, the sharp realization of someone who'd just glimpsed the shadowy truths that so few were ever allowed to see. She also knew what it meant for her carefully kept anonymity, that thin barrier she maintained between her and the world, to be pierced like this. In this place, with all these eyes on her, there was no undoing what he'd just figured out. She tilted her head slightly, her voice quiet but firm. "Far enough," she replied simply. The words hung in the air, understated and final. That was all she gave him, all she needed to give. Cole nodded once, grim but accepting. He pulled a secure device from his pocket, a small, hardened terminal that most of the personnel watching had never even seen before. Its screen glowed faintly as he began entering credentials, his fingers moving through layer after layer of encrypted authorization, each step deeper into a world most of these young shooters didn't even know existed. Minutes passed, the quiet punctuated only by the faint beeps of the device. No one dared speak. When Cole finally looked up, the weight in his eyes said it all. He turned to face the room, his voice rising, steady and clear now, carrying easily across the range. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his tone solemn, "what you just witnessed was extraordinary." The SEAL trainee who'd earlier tried to offer shooting tips, a young man with too much confidence and too little perspective, felt the blood drain from his face. His jaw slackened as he realized, too late, the depth of his mistake. Cole didn't let him off the hook. He raised his hand and gestured toward the target. That perfect, impossible, five-pointed star pattern, each shot placed with surgical precision. "What you've seen demonstrated here," Cole continued, "is not just exceptional marksmanship. This is a specialized technique, developed and perfected by Ghost Talent operatives for missions where missing was not an option, where the psychological effect of the shot pattern carried as much weight as the bullets themselves." The civilians blinked, some looking between Cole and Haley in disbelief. The trainees, still silent, simply stared. Cole's eyes settled on the young trainee who'd spent all that time lecturing about recoil control and sight alignment. "Son," Cole said, his voice sharp now, but not cruel, "you just spent 15 minutes trying to teach the basics of shooting to someone whose precision has enabled operations you don't even have the clearance to know exist." The young man's shoulders slumped as his confident grin collapsed into something closer to shame. He looked away, unable to meet Haley's eyes now. And Haley? She just stood there, quiet and still, watching him with that faint, knowing smile. The kind of smile worn by someone who didn't need to speak because her skill had already said everything that needed saying. The level of discipline and focus it takes to perform at her level. Her techniques are not just about hitting a target. They are about mastering yourself under pressure that most of you cannot yet imagine. This is not a lecture. This is an invitation. If you want to excel, learn from her. Watch, listen, and practice until your hands bleed, because that's the cost of real precision. The full weight of his words settled over the shooting range, a silence falling as every man and woman present absorbed the meaning. No one dared look at Haley the way they had before, with casual curiosity or patronizing doubt. Those expressions had been replaced with something more complex: respect, awe, and just a hint of shame at having underestimated her. Cole's gaze swept over the room once more, ensuring the lesson had landed. Then he turned back to her. His eyes, though still sharp and commanding, held an unspoken gratitude only someone who'd spent decades in the shadows of classified missions could convey. Haley, for her part, stayed outwardly calm, though she felt the faintest ripple of unease deep down. She'd spent so long guarding her anonymity that even this measured, respectful exposure felt dangerous. Still, she knew this moment was necessary, both to quiet the dangerous arrogance among the trainees and to protect the integrity of the range itself. When Cole met her eyes again, he inclined his head slightly, a silent acknowledgement between professionals who understood what it meant to operate where recognition was impossible and failure was unacceptable. Haley gave the smallest nod in return, her lips pressed into a line of quiet acceptance. At that, Cole turned back to the young trainee who'd earlier dared to correct her stance, his tone dropping into a controlled growl of authority. "You're not leaving until you show me you can group 5 shots tighter than a quarter inch. You'll keep shooting until you understand what precision really feels like, and until you can respect the discipline it takes to achieve it." The young man swallowed hard, but nodded quickly, his earlier smugness replaced by grim determination. He didn't protest, didn't look for sympathy, because he understood now he was being given a rare chance, the chance to measure himself against someone who embodied the highest possible standard. Cole straightened, his voice rising again to address everyone. "Anyone here who thinks they're already good enough, think again. Ms. Brooks will remain available for advanced consultation. If you're serious about improving, step up and ask her. Don't waste her time with excuses or empty pride. You want to reach her level? Earn it. She didn't get there by accident, and neither will you." Haley didn't speak as the trainees slowly began to disperse, but her presence alone commanded their attention. She stood at ease, eyes steady and unflinching as each of them stole glances at her, no longer seeing just a civilian at a shooting range, but something far more formidable. Cole lingered a moment longer, giving her one last crisp, formal salute. She returned it, her motion smooth and precise, her eyes locking on his with an understanding born of countless shared sacrifices neither could speak of here. Then she let her hand fall back to her side, watching as he turned and strode away, his sharp bark of orders already bringing the range back to life. Around her, the young SEALs still whispered and glanced her way, but the condescension was gone, replaced by an uneasy recognition of the ghost who'd just walked among them. Haley stayed where she was, calm and impassive on the outside, but inside she was already thinking ahead. She knew this was just one small skirmish in a much larger, ongoing battle to stay in the shadows. Too much light, she thought to herself, could be just as dangerous as any bullet. But for now, she let them look, let them learn. And when the next challenge came, she'd be ready, as she always was. What operational precision truly demanded was something most of them had never even considered. Commander Ryan Cole's voice carried that rare tone, quiet yet absolute, as he addressed the group before dismissing them. He didn't bother raising his voice. He didn't need to. The message sank into the room like a steel spike. "I strongly recommend that everyone here take full advantage of this opportunity." As the crowd began to disperse, you could see it on their faces, an uneasy shift, the kind that happens when bravado is stripped away and replaced by respect. Personnel shuffled off the line in subdued silence, carrying with them a new and sobering understanding of what they just witnessed. Cole didn't leave with them. Instead, he stepped forward deliberately, making his way to where Haley Brooks stood quietly by her lane, her rifle still cradled casually at her side. Up close, she looked at him with that same unreadable calm she'd worn since the moment she arrived. He met her gaze squarely, and his expression was nothing short of reverent. "Ma'am," he began, his voice pitched lower now, carrying something heavier. "You deserve to know stories of Ghost Talon precision operations have become legends among special operations commanders. For years, we've all wondered who those specialists were, the ones who made our hardest missions even possible." For the first time since she'd set foot on the range, a smile tugged at Haley's lips. Not a smirk, not forced. Just a quiet, unguarded smile that softened the sharpness of her otherwise disciplined demeanor. "Commander," she said, her voice even but warm, "precision fire support was always about one thing: enabling mission success for teams like yours. Individual recognition was never part of the operational parameters." Cole shook his head slowly, the faintest smile of admiration curling at the corners of his mouth. "No, ma'am, what you showed here today wasn't just precision fire support. That was," he exhaled, searching for a word big enough, "artistry applied to marksmanship. You reminded everyone here what real expertise looks like when it doesn't need to announce itself." She gave a single nod of acknowledgement before returning her focus to the rifle in her hands, preparing to continue her range session. But even as she reloaded and took her stance again, she was no longer just another civilian among soldiers. The very air in the facility had shifted around her. The place that had initially met her presence with skepticism, even mild condescension, now seemed almost reverent. The personnel moved differently now, more deliberate, more aware, having just watched her demonstrate what years of operational precision look like in a matter of seconds. The range resumed normal operations soon enough, but nothing was quite the same. Those who had been there would never again mistake recreational shooting for operational precision, and they would never forget that sometimes, right alongside ordinary marksmen, they're practiced legends. It didn't take long for word of the Ghost Talon Starfall demonstration to catch fire. Military networks and shooting communities alike lit up as story after story shot across interconnected channels. Within hours, it seemed like everyone, special operations personnel, marksmanship instructors, competitive shooters, had heard some version of what had happened that afternoon. They all spoke of her the same way: the quiet woman who had silenced an entire range with 5 perfect shots, revealing herself to be one of the most skilled operatives they'd ever heard of. For the SEAL trainee who had earlier tried to offer her tips on recoil management, the fallout was immediate and educational. Commander Cole himself assigned the young man to a grueling program of intensive precision shooting under the watchful eyes of the range's most senior instructors. When delivering the order, Cole didn't bother hiding his wry amusement. "This assignment," he said, handing over the directive, "will help you understand the difference between basic marksmanship and operational precision. And perhaps, just perhaps, studying real technique will teach you how to recognize expertise when you see it." The irony wasn't lost on anyone. The same soldier who had once tried to help a living legend was now spending every spare evening chasing shot groupings that still didn't come close to her impossible standard. Other SEAL personnel who had joined in the earlier dismissive chatter weren't spared either. Many volunteered, though some suspected it wasn't entirely voluntary, for additional duty. They found themselves immersed in advanced studies of marksmanship techniques in the mental discipline required to maintain precision under battlefield pressure. Cole moved quickly to ensure the lesson stuck. He implemented new protocols across the facility, making it clear that exceptional capabilities often came in unexpected forms, and that some of the most critical contributions to military success came from those who would never ask for, nor want, the recognition they deserved. Conventional authority shifted that day, not just in the minds of those who had witnessed the demonstration firsthand, but throughout the special operations community. More importantly, there was a quiet but unmistakable change in how military personnel began to approach encounters with civilian shooters and range users who, though unassuming, might carry with them extraordinary, specialized backgrounds. Word of what happened at the range spread quickly through the intricate web of special operations networks, passed in hushed tones and respectful nods. Soon, other training facilities began implementing similar respect protocols, understanding at last that legendary capabilities often move through unofficial channels, carried by those who preferred silence over ceremony. 2 months after that afternoon, Commander Ryan Cole received a secure, encrypted communication directly from Special Operations Command. The message was short, clinical in tone, but heavy with implication. It read simply, "Request immediate coordination with Brooks regarding advanced marksmanship training protocols. Classification level, restricted. Ghost talent expertise, essential for next-generation operator development." Cole sat back in his office chair after reading it, a grim understanding dawning over him. Haley's time at the civilian range had never been about leisure, never just casual shooting practice to pass the time. She had been maintaining operational readiness all along, blending into the quiet civilian world while staying prepared for the kind of missions that required her singular combination of technical mastery and unshakable psychological conditioning. The sort of missions only Ghost Talon operatives could execute. He found himself respecting her even more and wondering how many others like her walked unnoticed through the world. That weekend, Cole sought her out at the range, timing his arrival to coincide with one of her regular sessions. The air in the shooting lanes was cool and sharp with the smell of gun oil and cordite. Haley stood alone at her station, adjusting the fine-tuning on her rifle scope, her focus steady, her movements as precise and deliberate as ever. "Haley," he began, stepping up beside her, "I just received a priority communication from SOCOM. They're requesting your involvement in developing new precision shooting curricula for elite units." She didn't flinch, didn't even glance at him at first. Instead, she finished the minute adjustment on her scope, then finally looked up at him, her face calm and unreadable, as though she'd been expecting this all along. There was no surprise in her eyes at the recall to training duty, only quiet acceptance. "Tell them the techniques are ready for implementation," she said evenly. "Some skills can't be taught from manuals, Cole. They require demonstration by people who've applied them under real operational conditions." He hesitated for just a moment, watching her test her rifle's balance and sight alignment, and then asked the question that had been on his mind since receiving the order. "If you don't mind me asking, Haley, how many other ranges are you visiting for practice sessions?" That brought the faintest smile to her lips, a small, knowing curve of her mouth as she kept her eyes down on the rifle. "Commander," she said quietly, almost playfully, "Ghost Talon operatives don't retire from precision shooting. We just expand our training environment in Rashfront to include anywhere that maintains proper safety protocols and appreciates real marksmanship." When she left the range that evening, already preparing herself mentally for the assignment ahead, Cole stayed behind, watching her disappear into the fading light. He reflected on how profoundly his own perspective on civilian-military interactions had shifted, how much more deeply he now understood the hidden expertise that moved invisibly through the civilian world. He realized then that the most valuable military capabilities didn't always announce themselves through ranks or uniforms, didn't always march through official channels. They lived quietly among us, maintained by networks of specialists who kept their edge while living what seemed from the outside like ordinary lives. The lesson stayed with him, and in the months that followed, it continued to ripple outward, influencing training protocols across multiple special operations commands. It became a quiet guiding principle. Never underestimate the quiet ones. 4 months later, a small memorial appeared at the range, installed with no ceremony and no fanfare. A discreet bronze plaque was mounted on the wall near the precision shooting lanes. Its inscription was simple, almost stark in its brevity: "To those who demonstrate that legends live quietly among us." True legends don't need introductions or announcements to prove their worth. Sometimes they live in the space between heartbeats and trigger pulls, carried by those who know that skill speaks louder than any words ever could. Haley Brooks never sought recognition for the years she had spent perfecting techniques that existed at the delicate intersection of art and warfare. And neither did the hundreds of other Ghost Talon operatives, invisible precision specialists who served quietly, their legends written not in medals or headlines, but in every silent shot that found its mark when it mattered most. They had spent their careers cultivating capabilities that allowed them to carry out missions most people would never even know had happened. To them, success wasn't about parades or headlines. It was about meeting objectives where failure would have meant disaster on a scale too great to contemplate. Some marksmen aren't defined by trophies or medals hanging in glass cases. They are defined by the operations they make possible, their precision pushing beyond what anyone believes humanly possible. On her forearm, the ink of her tattoo was more than a personal memento. It was proof of service in a world so secretive that its victories could never be named, only felt in the continued survival of missions too critical to fail. That mark was her quiet claim to a place among those rare few whose skills lived on a level most shooters could never imagine. That day at the range, standing under the fluorescent lights and the faint smell of gunpowder, She had faced the usual dismissive looks and casual jokes of the young SEAL trainees and civilian shooters who thought they knew what expertise looked like. They measured skill by shiny credentials and conventional notions of rank and reputation. To them, she was just another woman at a public range. No longer in uniform. No longer somebody. Haley hadn't argued. She hadn't announced her history or demanded their respect. She didn't correct their condescension or flash a badge. Instead, she simply loaded her rifle and let her work speak for itself. 5 rounds. 5 perfect holes that spoke louder than any words could. A story written on paper with a precision none of them had ever seen before. And eventually, one by one, the laughter stopped. Silence settled over the firing line as the right set of eyes that knew what they were looking at, caught the significance of those shots. Those 5 holes rippled far beyond that range. Long after the target had been replaced and the paper swept into the trash, the consequences lingered. Commander Ryan Cole, a legend in the SEAL community, took note. His new protocols, inspired by what he'd witnessed that day, were adopted not only throughout his teams, but across shooting facilities and military training centers in 37 countries. A cultural shift followed. Through his influence, the marksmanship community began to learn how to recognize and respect those whose skills didn't fit neatly into a uniform or a competition bracket. Training programs began to include lessons on operational level precision and the psychological resilience required to shoot under the most unimaginable pressure. New recruits were warned of the most dangerous assumption of all, thinking you could judge someone's capabilities just by looking at them. 2 years after that quiet demonstration, a package arrived for her through secure military channels. No return address, only a simple black envelope. Inside lay a heavy black challenge coin etched with the ghost talon, eagle, and serpent. There was also a folded handwritten note. For those who understand that some stories are written in bullet patterns rather than words, your silent precision continues to inspire legends. It was signed, not with names, but with operational codes she instantly recognized from missions on 6 continents. Missions where that kind of precision had spelled the difference between catastrophe and completion. She placed the coin carefully next to her rifle case. She didn't need to display it, didn't need to tell anyone what it meant. She understood. Some forms of recognition honor not just a single shooter, but the unseen web of quiet, impossible skill that makes visible operations possible. Some people measure their legacy by trophies glinting under spotlights. But there is another kind of legacy carried silently by those who hit their mark when it matters most, asking for nothing more than the knowledge that their precision lets others succeed. The greatest marks are often the ones no audience ever sees, carried inside by those who understand that legends don't need applause. They only need someone who knows how to listen to the silence and read the story written in holes on a target.